Hello everybody and welcome to another video tutorial slash time lapse. This one today is for a children's book called The Irrelevant Elephant by Melinda Kaufman. And this right here is a scene between a brother and sister who are having an argument over the elephant in the description having crushed his controller. There's more to the story. I don't want to get into that too much because that's basically why the author wrote and commissioned me to do the art, so she could tell the story. But here you'll see me. What I'm actually doing is I've done a really small thumbnail and I scanned it into my computer using my printer, and then I blew up the image to 8.5 by 11, which is the size that the author requested for the images. And I'm just having a little scene right here with Lily and Alex. And Lily's obviously, she's wearing a little ballerina outfit. That's kind of her go-to look in this children's book. And they're in Alex's room, so I'm doing my best to make it seem like a room a boy would live in. However, I have kids. I would never let them have a TV and video game system in their room. At least not now. They'd be in there and only in there and never come out. I would never see them again, except for short, quick bursts to the bathroom and to get something to eat. But as you can see here, I'm kind of really fleshing out the image itself. It was nothing but like very basic composition design. And in the background, you see me drawing. You're kind of implying a couple of Italian plumbers within that video game, just for something to see in the background. And this image is this series of images were a bit of a challenge for me, basically because not only has it been a while since I've done this many illustrations and tried to maintain a cohesive look and color palette between all of them, but I was also using a new program, and this has taught me a lot. This whole thing has been an experience using Krita, which I actually really ended up enjoying. It's very similar to Photoshop. There are some differences, but overall it's very enjoyable. If you guys have watched any of my other videos, you've seen me talking about that. Here I'm just going through it and I'm trying to do some nice ink lines. Originally I was wanting to do all this in a traditional look, but things didn't quite work out, so I decided to go with digital, simply because it's easier to edit and correct your images if there are any mistakes, and you can play around a lot more, and also it makes it a lot easier to record. One thing I wanted to do for these set of illustrations was record all of them so that I could add them to YouTube to show these images and get this story out there, because I support what the author was doing. She's a Christian author, and I'm a Christian myself, so I really wanted to support that and kind of get that message out there. So I'm doing my best to try to make things look not crisp and clean. I want them to be kind of sketchy. I can't remember the exact name that it's called, but it's a specific style where you kind of make things look more childish, which is something that children can relate to, especially if they draw themselves. You know, most of them aren't extremely proficient at a very young age. Some are. Some, you got your kids out there that are fantastic, you know, they can be. But on average, you know, it's just something you do to involve the kids a little bit more. And you can see how I added a little bit more line variation to the characters themselves as opposed to in the background. I'm trying to keep things very simple in the background. And later on, you'll see me when I'm choosing colors, try to keep things very simple and plain in the background as well, so that you're focused more on the interaction and emotion between the two characters up front. That's very important in an illustration, because you want your audience to focus on the characters themselves, the emotions, and the things that are going on, and everything else is kind of accent and filler. You want there, at least I do. Other artists choose different directions, but for this project, this is what I was gonna go for. Main focus on the emotion and the kind of, I guess, the struggle, the conflict between characters. I think that was the most important thing. I'm just going through trying to figure out my colors. For time's sake, I actually cut a bunch of stuff out. Otherwise, this would have been an extremely long process. But using Krita, I kind of go around and I'll fill in the colors, but then I have to go back in with my brush, because for some reason when you use the selection tool like that, or the fill tool, it leaves a small line. It's hard to see depending on what color's in the background, but it leaves a line that you have to fill in. But otherwise, I think it's quicker to just do the quick fill and fix that line rather than coloring everything in, which is another benefit to doing things digitally. Obviously when you're doing it traditionally, you have to actually do all the brush strokes and fill everything in, which is a wonderful thing. It looks great. I love traditional art, but digital art is good for no messes, quick cleanups, quick fill-ins, all that sort of stuff. And you'll see me as I go through try to add some messiness to make it look more traditional towards the end. And I think I pulled it off a little bit to add just a bit of personality to the images themselves. And you see here I'm in the background. I had some brighter colors back there, and I tried to push them back so they don't grab as much attention. And throughout the image, throughout the rest of the video, you're going to see me just trying to sort out what colors I want, how much shadow to add, and all that stuff. Some things, I'll leave just for an idea of what I want, and then I'll go back and you can go through each layer and lower the opacity, etc. Like those shadows right now, I eventually change those. I don't like how intrusive they are, I guess would be the word. Here I am just filling in the background a bit, and you see those lines that I was talking about. I have to go through and go over each and every one of those lines. I haven't figured out a great way to do the whole fill-in process yet. I'm sure there is. I just need to look more into it. But the great thing about Photoshop is there's also layers. So whenever I want to go in and do some more colors now, say on like the speakers or the TV, I can go to the layer below it and just fill in no problem without having to worry about going over the lines or anything like that. You see me, I did a color adjustment there. I actually forgot to record for a little bit, and I wasn't happy with how dark it was. It was pulling too much attention. Whenever you're doing an image and you have a lot of contrast in one area, that's where the eye tends to go. So you want to kind of blend things together in the back without making them boring, or trying not to. It's all based on a personal opinion, the artists and the viewers. So you just want to do what you can with what you got and try to get the best image that you can. And here I'm just adding shadows to like the carpet and the walls. Further, it's kind of like creating a border around the characters, so you focus more on them. That's why I put the yellow there for the rug. The bright yellow is a good place for the eye to go, initially, and then it'll circle hopefully around that area, around the edges. Your eyes will want to work around in the middle of the images where the characters are. And I've got the line going back to the TV, and then the TV goes to the bed comes back to the rug. Hopefully it's a circular motion that keeps the eye interested in what's going on in the image itself. And you want to pick colors that are fun as well, bright colors, especially for kids. At least I do for my images. That's what I was going for with this one, kind of a pastel colorish look. And I did struggle a bit because this was the first image trying to develop the color palette that I actually liked. And you'll see as I do more images and more videos that the color palette stays very similar and gets a bit more expressive, especially during other certain emotional scenes. And it's one thing you want to keep in mind. This one, I went with a lot of blue because it is kind of not an emotionally vibrant, like positive moment for them. So I kept a lot of blue in the background for like emotion. Blue isn't the happiest of emotions, depending on the context, because you can have bright, beautiful blue skies, and those are fantastic. It's a wonderful feeling. But in a house, it kind of denotes like kind of shadow and other things. And you'll see me go through here, like I'm selecting their skin color and I'm on a different layer, and I just go in and I add like the shadows and the highlights and stuff like that. You'll see me change it. Like the final image will be slightly different than what you're seeing here, because I do go back and change a little bit about the image. The characters themselves, I stick to a very kind of cell shaded look. I don't do a whole lot of soft brush. I do mostly hard brush, and you'll see that change at the final image. That way they also pop out from the backgrounds, because the backgrounds I do a bit more shading and other flexible stuff. It's hard to say exactly what I was doing, because I just kind of go with the feel of it, what I think and what I feel as I'm drawing. And a lot of times you don't see it, but I'll actually do these images and I'll walk away for a while and then come back kind of with some fresh eyes. And you'll see throughout this process, sometimes I'll flip the canvas and it'll flip-flop horizontally, so that it tricks your brain into kind of seeing it as a new image, and then usually any glaring flaws will pop out at you. And I don't believe I really saw any glaring flaws in this one. I did actually make a correction at the beginning of this that I don't think was seen as I was drawing. The characters were a little bit too tilted, so I did some fixing in there, because I have a tendency, and a lot of people do, if you're right or left-handed, you tend to slant things in a certain direction. If you're right-handed, you kind of slant them one way, and if you're left-handed, you tend to slant them another. So flipping the image is especially important as an artist, so you can see if you have developed flaws in your drawing as you've been drawing. And then if you look in the background there, you can see that the shadows are a lot less distinct than they were earlier. I toned them down quite a bit. Basically, as you're working, sometimes it's best just to do things, do them big, do them bold, and then, just as like placeholders, and later on you can go back and adjust them to exactly how you want them. Now, this is pretty much just a digital method. If you're working traditionally, you either want to start dark and work light, or start light and work dark, depending on what medium you're using. If you're using watercolors and stuff, you start out light and you slowly build up your contrast and your values. Values are how dark and light things are. And then your hues, which are your colors, you can go from dull to saturated, or saturated to dull, depending on the situation. And in this kid's book, I actually use a lot of fairly saturated colors. You'll see the little triangle up there in the right of the Krita program. You can see the little circle. It'll move around from one side to the other. And the further you get to the left side, the less saturated you are. And the further you get to the right side, the more saturated you are. I'm sure a lot of people watching this know that, but some people may not. And this program, Krita, is free to use if you want to do any digital drawing. You just go ahead and download it and have fun, basically. Here I'm doing a lot of the finishing touches. This image really isn't going to change a whole lot more. I wanted those to be like brass handles in the back, but I didn't want them to stick out too much. And you'll see I use a lot of similar colors, like from that rug, to kind of tie the image together as much as possible. And when I did those little knobs, I reduced the opacity of the layer, I believe. That way they kind of blend into the background a bit more. But we're getting close to the end here. I saved the controller for last, I believe. And you see right in the middle there, I had forgotten to color in the rug. So it's a good thing to go over your image multiple times and make sure that you've actually done everything correctly, because when you have so much going on, it's easy to get a little Twitter-pated and confused as to what's going on. So just go back over your image and make sure you get it all correct. But if anybody has any questions, if you like it, if you want to comment, possibly subscribe, because there's going to be a lot more. There's going to be at least 12 more images. As long as the writer wants me to, I'll put them in there. Take care. Bye bye.